The closing bell has rung, but the business story continues. I'm Robert Tan, you're watching Business Brief. Let's get started. The country searches for new oil suppliers amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Several European countries, including Japan, say they are willing to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. And the Philippine Coast Guard denies involvement in talks about a maritime cooperation agreement with China. Central banks around the world announced they will maintain rates amid heightened global economic risk due to the Middle East conflict. The Bank of England said that it had kept its benchmark interest unchanged at 3.75%. The Swiss National Bank, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, and Bank of Canada likewise announced the same move. The institutions say they will continue to monitor the situation in the Middle East. Conditions for the proposed excise tax suspension on fuel products are under review. That's according to Palace Press Officer Claire Castro. Castro's statement came after President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said the proposal would require first a thorough assessment of multiple factors. Castro said the president's power to suspend or reduce excise taxes can only be exercised if the average Dubai crude oil exceeds $80 per barrel for 1 month. She added that while the price of Dubai crude oil has reached more than $100 per barrel, the level has not been sustained for a full month. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. directs the Department of Foreign Affairs to secure new oil suppliers. This came as the government moves to shield the economy from rising Middle East tensions. Speaking at the Federation of Philippine Industries Forum, Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro said DFA posts and ambassadors have been tasked to engage with host governments and energy officials. The DFA will open new posts in Fiji, Ghana, and Kazakhstan to expand the country's energy and diplomatic reach. The United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Netherlands are ready to help in efforts to ensure the safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. But French President Emmanuel Macron asserts clashes between Iran, the U.S., and Israel must de-escalate. Our Middle East updates from Joel Caballero.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the country will heed the call of U.S. President Donald Trump not to attack key Iranian energy sites. Tehran has retaliated by targeting energy infrastructure in Israel and Qatar. Israeli media reports that an Iranian strike hit oil facilities in Israel's port of Haifa on Thursday. The attack caused damage but no casualties. French President Emmanuel Macron is among European leaders who are calling for a de-escalation of the Middle East conflict. Speaking at the European summit in Brussels, he urges all parties in the conflict to immediately implement moratorium on strikes targeting civilian infrastructure.
I have not heard anyone here, other EU leaders, express a willingness to enter this conflict, quite the opposite. And I do not believe that taking part in an escalation, should one occur, would in any way resolve the international situation or its consequences for our economies.
But the conflict could get worse. U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington needs more funding for military operations in Iran. This was his response when asked about reports that the Pentagon is seeking $200 billion for the conflict. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also defended the request for additional funding.
As far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future.
Israel may be conducting its own attacks in Iran, but its people do not like it. Israelis protest in Tel Aviv on Thursday. They are demanding an end to the U.S.-Israel war on Iran and the conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Joel Caballero, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. inspects a food manufacturing facility in Laguna to see if it has enough supply to delay a price increase. Ivy Reyes filed this report.
President Bongbong Marcos took to Laguna today to speak with Century Pacific Food Incorporated, who has also agreed to keep their prices at a minimum. Until Century Pacific can hold out, PBBM said there is enough supply for the next month, while some manufacturers agreed to a 2-month price freeze. Century Pacific reports that they hold about 50% of the nation's total canned food volume. And at this facility today, the corporation has about 1.2 million boxes of different goods, including canned meat, milk, and sardines. The corporation assures the government that they have enough capacity to meet consumer demand. And on their end, Century Pacific said there remains no shortage of essential food products.
Andito tayo upang tignan ang ating ang supply ng pagkain at ang presyuhan ng pagkain dahil lahat ng ahensya ng pamahalaan. Siyempre, nilalapitan natin ang mga partner natin na food suppliers para sa pang-araw-araw ng taong bayan. At kami naman, nakita naman ninyo, ito isa lamang ito, 10% pa lang ito sa kanilang stock. Ibig sabihin, hindi lamang ang Century kundi ang iba't ibang mga food processors at saka retailers ay maayos naman ang stock natin. At bukod pa ron ay sila naman ay pumapayag na to keep the prices na hindi muna basta hindi tataas ang presyo hangga't kaya nila. Kaya siguro mga 1 buwan, yung iba baka 2 buwan, hindi magagalaw yung presyo.
There are also no reported hoarding or profiteering in commercial markets, according to the Trade and Industry Department. Now, after the 30-day cap of the price freeze, DTI Secretary Cristina Roque said weekly coordination with manufacturers are conducted due to the unusual circumstances faced by markets amid the crisis in Iran. And it is a worldwide situation, Roque stressed, which is why the public needs to know the real status of our supply chains. But as for now, supply remains ample for the whole nation.
Ivy Reyes, Bilyonaryo Channel.
Philippine Airlines announces the temporary suspension of its flights between Manila and selected Middle East destinations. The suspension will last until April 30th. The destinations include Doha and Dubai. PAL clarifies this is a precautionary measure considering the security situation in the Middle East. The country's flag carrier asserts its passengers, crew, and aircraft remains its highest priority. PAL says it continues to closely monitor developments in the Middle East. Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro says the Philippines and the European Union, or EU, aim to complete free trade agreement talks in the second half of 2026. In a forum, Lazaro reported that the Philippine-EU free trade agreement negotiations could open up a market of nearly 450 million high-income consumers. Talks for a Philippine-EU free trade agreement were first launched in December 2015, but stalled after the EU raised humanitarian concerns during the Duterte administration. The talks formally resumed in Brussels in March 2014. An economist believes Middle East conflict may drive up Philippine inflation. On BNC's Business 360, Peter Lee Yu of the University of Asia and the Pacific said a prolonged conflict could worsen the burden on households.
And then there is also the possibility of what we call a problem of stagnation. No? So in economics, you've got stagnation, you've got the combination of high prices, high inflation.
Yes.
And at the same time, economic activity, GDP slows down. So there is a risk of that if this happens long enough. Not just in the Philippines, but even all over the world.
Manila Water Company is fast-tracking a multi-billion peso diversification of its raw water supply. The firm, led by ultra-Bilyonaryo Enrique Razon Jr., said this move reduces reliance on a single source and ensures reliability service for 7.8 million customers. The plan focuses on the Upper Wawa Dam and related bulk water facilities. The infrastructure can deliver up to 710 million liters per day. It provides a critical buffer during peak summer demand and El Nino cycles. Manila Water says securing alternative sources help the company maintain reliable service. Volunteers load humanitarian aid onto a vessel bound for Cuba in Mexico. The first ship departed from the port of Progreso, Yucatan on Thursday, and 3 more will set sail from Isla Mujeres, Quintana Roo on Friday. The plan is to arrive in Havana on March 21. The humanitarian effort reflected growing citizen-led initiatives to support Cuba amid a worsening energy and supply crisis driven primarily by severe fuel shortages imposed by the U.S. administration. We'll take a short break. This is Business Brief. Oil prices are climbing amid renewed tensions in the Middle East. The peso has breached the 60 peso to dollar level and is showing sustained weakness. The stock market is turning cautious, and credit rating agency Fitch has signaled that securing or maintaining an A-rated sovereign credit score is becoming more challenging under current conditions. At the same time, debates are intensifying around fuel excise tax suspension and other cost relief measures. These developments are interconnected and have implications for business costs, consumer prices, investment sentiment, and policy direction. And joining us this afternoon is John Paulo Rivera to help break down what these signs mean and where the economy might be headed next. Good afternoon, JP. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
JP, looking at oil prices, the peso breaching 60 pesos to the dollar, and market being cautious. Now, how would you describe the current economic snapshot?
Well, the economy right now is on a high pressure, but I believe the government has still some runway to actually manage the current condition. And with a combination of everything that's going on right now, there will be higher inflation, higher prices of basic commodities, and investors would now tend to be very cautious or defensive about what's going on.
Wait and see na naman.
Again, we are at that situation again.
Right now, Fitch recently flagged that an A rating is harder to secure now under the current conditions. Now, what does that signal to markets and policymakers?
Well, according to the recent Fitch rating, I believe the Philippines is still at a BBB, and outlook remains to be stable.
Yes.
Well, it simply means that the upgrade to a higher rating is becoming narrower, but I don't see it as necessarily having to downgrade our ratings. It just means that we are becoming more cautious and that the ratings would be pressured should the risks globally and domestically would become more structural or inherent in the
Triple B is still
economy.
quite good.
It is still, it is still.
Now, oil prices are rising again due to tensions in the Middle East. Beyond fuel costs, what channels of the economy are most immediately affected by this?
The first round of transmission is not limited to gasoline.
Yes.
So the effects can feed into transportation, into logistics, into food, into what? Even aviation and tourism.
So, I mean, a lot is affected. So how can we mitigate all this? What kinds of policies can the government, let's say, implement now? Or do we already have these policies in place and not yet being implemented today?
Well, there are two kinds of intervention, if I may call it an intervention, two kinds of intervention that government can implement. One of them would be the quick, the short term, and the other one should be the long term.
Yes.
So for the short term, I would have to agree that the ayuda, the temporary fixes, or the cash grants that are being distributed right now are there to alleviate the issue, the burden to our fellow Filipino temporarily, but we have to understand that these are not the cure. They are simply buffers. That's why it's also very important that learning from the previous crisis that we have encountered, that knee-jerk reactions might not work all the time. So structural reforms such as investing in renewable energy, looking for alternative sources of power, and then food security, so that we are actually protecting, hedging against sudden economic shocks, like what we're experiencing
in the
right
long
now.
term. But
in the long term.
Doing that does take time. And for immediate effects right now, what do you think is the quick fix?
Well, quick fix will always be to support households financially through what's going on right now, and then also look into ways, specific ways by which firms, particularly MSMEs, how can they facilitate cash preservation? Because one of the study that we did in PIDS was that firms, or at the corporate level actually prioritizes cash preservation, liquidity in terms of uncertainties like this one, so that they are able to continue their operation, but not necessarily towards aggressive growth.
Yeah, but how do businesses cut costs without having to get rid of employees?
Well, I would like to call it cutting waste.
Yes.
Like, for example, a lot of organizations right now, both public and private, are into shutting down their electricity during lunch break, air conditioning, or even implementing a four-day work week, so that they're able to save on electricity costs, preserve their liquidity, because cutting down on their waste, wasteful electricity use, wasteful resource use, actually giving them more buffer to tread this uncertainty.
Small sacrifice that go a long way.
Exactly.
Now, JP, at what point do elevated oil prices translate into broader inflation, slower growth, or reduced consumption? And being a predominantly consumer-driven economy, how does that pan out for us?
Well, I think the issue here is more of the persistence. No? So the longer this uncertainty exists, or proceeds, then the risk that all of us, both households and firms, are facing would also tend to be prolonged. So what we have to do now is to be able to tread this one through buffers, contingency interventions that will allow us to survive.
Now, JP, the peso has breached the 60 peso mark against the dollar. Now, how should businesses and importers, most importantly, interpret this level in terms of cost structures and pricing decisions?
Well, for importers specifically, I think they should be able to see this one as a stress signal. It's because breaching the 60 would mean that their import costs would be higher, that they would need more peso to buy a dollar, to purchase their products, their goods that they are shipping here to the Philippines. So they have to prepare for higher costs, higher prices that they must be charging to the consumers. So that timing, that balance of how much to pass on to consumers is very critical right now, especially that we know that in these times of uncertainty, demand would actually slow down.
But for the MSMEs who have thinner margins and doesn't have that much capital to really hedge on this, what can they do?
Well, for the MSMEs, and this is where government can come in, support for the MSME so that they are able to preserve their liquidity, or to at least get that buffer so that they can preserve their liquidity for the time being.
Now, how does currency weakness play into this, feed into inflation, expectations, and corporate decisions on investment and hiring?
Well, the thing is, there are two effects here. One is direct, and the second one, if I may call it, psychological. So the direct would be, of course, with currency depreciation, input costs would actually increase. But psychologically speaking, firms would tend to expect that prices would continue to increase. So now they are being very cautious about capital expenditure, hiring, even having these programs for firm growth. So that wait and see, that cautious behavior tends to slow down business activities.
And talking about cautious behavior, we're seeing a more cautious stock market. Now, to what extent is this driven by the global risks versus domestic pressures like the peso or ratings outlook?
I would say it's both. It just happened that as of the moment, it is actually the global events or global triggers that's actually dominating. And we both have to manage the domestic risks and foreign risks, otherwise capital flight may happen.
You mentioned capital flight. Now, when markets do turn cautious under these conditions, what is the typical impact on the capital flows, the investment activity, and the risk appetite of investors, those who are still on the wait-and-see outlook, but those who still want to invest today?
I see. Actually, looking at the behavior of investors, I would have to emphasize that capital flight does not happen at the same time. Cash doesn't leave all at the same time. There is a delay. There is some transition period here. But the thing is, in this period of uncertainty, cash or investments rather are very difficult to attract at this point in time, but it's very easy to scare them because of what's going on.
So it's inevitable. I mean, it's going to take time, but inevitable that capital will take flight.
Yeah, it will take time. However, should the ongoing issues, geopolitical issues, global risks would tend to temper in the near term, then we might be able to see some reversal in what's going on.
Now, the government is debating suspending excise taxes on fuel. From your perspective, how effective is this measure cushioning the broader economic impact? And how fast will that be, if ever, the excise taxes will be suspended or lowered?
Well, in speaking of the excise tax, we have to agree, right, that suspending this one would actually alleviate the burden on our fellow Filipinos, particularly those in the transport sector. However, it is only temporary. The suspension of the excise tax is not a cure, but rather it's a buffer, because suspending it totally for an extended period of time will now sacrifice fiscal space for our government. We all know that the excise tax is a significant source of government revenues, and suspending it for a longer period of time might sacrifice social protection, infrastructure project, and so on. That will also benefit most of our fellow Filipinos.
But what are your thoughts that it has to be sustained for 30 days if it's over $80 per barrel? The 30 days, that's quite long. By that time, do you think it will work, or maybe the Middle East tensions would already subside by then?
Well, that's the issue now, because, I mean, talking from the perspective of an ordinary Filipino, the goal now of a Filipino is to actually survive the day. So waiting for 30 days, which is today, I need to survive today, and waiting for 30 days might be too late, if I may say it that way, because the waiting time for our fellow Filipinos is different from how other stakeholders would wait.
But are there
timing is of the essence.
But are there trade-offs or risks involved in suspending the excise taxes, especially for fiscal balance and long-term revenue? A lot of revenue will be, not be collected if the excise tax is suspended or lowered, and that takes a lot of money out of the government coffers to actually be able to either use it for infrastructure or other projects that would help grow the economy.
Well, that's why timing is always of the essence here, because suspending it for too long might now sacrifice the important projects of the government that will benefit the Filipinos, particularly social protection, education, health. Having a limited fiscal space to finance this, then the suffering, the burden would actually double.
Now, beyond excise tax relief, what policy tools remain available to address cost pressures, and which ones should be prioritized by the government?
Well, again, priorities would really come in two ways. One would be to ensure that liquidity is preserved among our firms. And second would be, what are we currently doing right now so that in the future, I mean, this will not be the last time this will happen, that in the future, we do not have necessarily a knee-jerk reaction to every crisis that we have. Preparation is key.
Preparation. Like you've mentioned, a lot of lessons should have been learned from the past of what happened, the issues before. Do you think there are lessons that learned that are being implemented today to help mitigate what's happening, the issues surrounding this?
Well, on top of head, I mean, both public sector and private sector are now very conscious of liquidity, very conscious of unintended effects, and are ready with certain policies like a work-from-home setup, a calibrated use of resources and energy, because during the pandemic, everything was uncertain. Similarly, right now, everything is also uncertain. So the buffers that private sector and public sector has, I think that's a good learning. But we're slowly getting there.
Now, today, everybody's looking at the peso to dollar rate, which, again, we mentioned a while ago, it's surpassed 60. What is your forecast, let's say, in the next week, next 2 weeks?
Well, this is anchored on what's actually going on now in the Middle East, all the geopolitical tensions, even our own domestic problems. So for the near term, the exchange rate may continue to hover around 60s, but I'm really expecting that should the tensions ease and the supply chain for gasoline improves or go back to normal, then I'm really hoping that the private sector, the gasoline companies, would now also roll back its prices of gasoline.
Now, we mentioned the MSMEs with the rising input costs, the currency risk, and weaker demand. Now, which challenge do you see as most urgent that they should look into?
Well, for that, the most important challenge now, I think, is cash preservation, liquidity preservation for everyone, for both households, firms, government, private sector, because in this very uncertain time, you always need to be...
Everyone na, not just the MSMEs.
Not just MSMEs.
It affected everyone. Just...
Liquidity is king, cash is king, so that the decisions, any decisions you would make, could easily be implemented.
Now, for households dealing with the rising prices, what key indicators should they watch to understand more whether these pressures are temporary or structural, and to help them at least find out ways while waiting for, let's say, help or subsidies to stand on their own?
Well, let me put my household hat on, ordinary Filipino hat. So I would say I would really monitor the movement of the exchange rate and how inflation, both core and headline inflation rate, would move. Because if the situation, or if the rates or the figures, the statistics continue to hover at the same amount or even increase or worsen, then it is an indication that the crisis, or not really a crisis, but the threats, the risks are actually being absorbed by the economy, are becoming structural, and that the economy cannot anymore absorb these risks, that it is able to go back to its normal level.
Now, looking ahead, what economic indicators, again, or data points should we all should monitor closely to assess whether the conditions are stabilizing and not deteriorating?
Well, other than the exchange rate and inflation, I will also look at the behavior of monetary policy, the interest rate, the decision of the central bank to do monetary policy. I would monitor that because it is an indication, again, whether the risks are becoming more structural or just temporary. Because I believe now, as of the moment, again, as what I mentioned earlier, we still have the runway to manage this one, and I do not see this to becoming really structural, but rather more of a transitory or temporary.
And finally, JP, best advice you could give to everyone? You said everyone's affected, households, small businesses, everyone's hurting right now. So what would be your best advice for them moving on while waiting for things to ease out?
Well, my advice to everyone is let us always be mindful of spending. I think today is a great time for us to reevaluate. Am I spending on essentials or non-essentials? That's what I have mentioned earlier. Cash is king. Liquidity is king. So I would really advise to focus on the essentials.
Balance. Choose gasoline, food, rent, electricity. Ang dami nun. You have to juggle a lot.
We can set aside first perhaps luxury spending and so on.
Tighten our belts. Okay, on that note, JP, thank you very much for your insights and your time today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take a short break. This is Business Brief. Thank you. World oil prices eased after several European nations and Japan joined efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Another factor is America's efforts to boost its supply. Despite the drop, prices remain well above levels before the U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran. Brent crude fell 3% to $105.43 a barrel. However, by 2:03 p.m. Manila time, it traded at $106.71 per barrel. Here at home, oil prices are expected to hit triple digits again. Diesel could reach 130 pesos per liter, while gasoline may climb above 100 pesos next week. Senator Bam Aquino is seeking aid for micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, and vulnerable middle class affected by rising prices. Aquino said many minimum wage earners and small business owners do not qualify for traditional government assistance but remain vulnerable to economic shocks. He added that targeted government aid should also be extended to MSMEs and transport sector workers to keep the economy afloat amid the oil crisis. The Light Rail Transit Authority, or LRTA, is ramping up crowd control measures and maintenance amid the expected influx of passengers when the 50% fare discount takes effect for the LRT2. LRT Administrator Attorney Hernando Cabrera says commuters can now save up to 15 pesos per trip. He says while they expect a 35 million peso monthly revenue loss, they are expanding the non-rail revenue streams to offset the impact of discounted fares.
For Line 2, yun nga, umaabot around mga 130 million plus yung ating non-rail income.
Yes.
Non-rail business income, yes. At nakakatulong ito sa pag-sustain ng ating operations.
Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium or make ballistic missiles. That's after 20 days of U.S.-Israeli air attacks, according to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But he did not provide evidence for his claim. Iran's nuclear program was the focus of negotiations with the U.S., but it collapsed, prompting Washington and Israel to launch air attacks. The House impeachment hearings are set for next week, but Vice President Sara Duterte is unlikely to show up. On BNC's The Spokes, Duterte's legal team, led by attorney Michael Poa, said they are still deciding whether her appearance would be strategic. The defense team, however, remains confident they can debunk the allegations if the complaints move to the Senate.
Sa akin, of course, the impeachment is isang pinakabalakid talaga for the presidential, campaign, because obviously, if she gets impeached, she will be disqualified. So we're doing all we can to not only protect her legally, but even to simplify the issues to the public para maintindihan nila. We are confident that we will be able to show that these complaints are baseless. Now, as to the acquittal or not, as we all know, it's a matter of numbers. But we're hoping to convince as many senator judges as we can to get those numbers.
Legal experts are sounding the alarm over what they say is a system designed to favor power and wealth over justice. On BNC's Abogado, Attorney J.V. Bautista of Artikulo 11 said accountability institutions are structurally weak, where power often triumphs the rule of law.
They are built to fail. Why? Because power and wealth would trump accountability institutions. It is really power and wealth that will dictate the outcome of any investigation and accountability in the end. Whether a senator or a congressman or a president will be convicted or not depends on who is wielding power.
UP College of Law professor Attorney Barry Gutierrez added that without real convictions in the flood control scandal, public trust in institutions will continue to erode.
So, the way to actually restore yung flagging confidence na yon and trust in the system is talagang yung sinabi ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos nung November na may makukulong bago makano. Kailangan mangyari yun. It cannot just be an empty promise. Kasi otherwise, ang alternative nakakatakot. When people completely lose trust dun sa mga ganitong institusyon, saan pupunta yan? Saan pupunta yung galing?
The Philippine Coast Guard is denying involvement in any talks about a maritime cooperation agreement with China. Jay Tariela, spokesman for the agency, said the PCG had no role in crafting any arrangement with the China Coast Guard, particularly one involving coordinated patrols. Chinese officials reportedly said Manila and Beijing are nearing completion of a Coast Guard cooperation agreement, with the draft reportedly 95% finished. We're taking another break. This is Business Brief. The transport strike led by Piston enters its second day, drawing more support from various sectors. Our correspondent, Ched Gatchalian, is on the line for this report. Go ahead, Ched.
Robert, yes, transport groups on strike intensified on its second day, with more participants coming from various sectors and other progressive groups. The Philippine National Police told us earlier there are more protesters today compared to yesterday. And we can see that from several jeeps flying the Welcome Rotunda route with placards to participants holding various flags of their organization. Quezon President Modi Florando said the protests will continue until all the requests are met. As they said, the current economic crisis is affecting both drivers and commuters.
Wilga, tuloy-tuloy ito na ilulunsad natin hanggat hindi binabasura ni BBM yung Old Regulation Law, hanggat hindi tinatanggal yung isa-isa at saka yung VAT, hanggat hindi iniro-roll back sa halagang 55 pesos per liter ang presyo ng petrolyo.
Right now, Robert, we're here at Menjola. The group continued to amplify their calls, expecting President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will finally give their demand. The PNP said the protests today remained peaceful, just like yesterday. Robert?
Ched, do we have information if Piston will continue their protests tomorrow?
About that, Robert, Florando said earlier they are still in talks on the next schedule of their upcoming protest, but Piston pledged that definitely they will continue mobilizing until all their calls are heard. Robert Piston added that on the second day of their strike, several thoroughfares in Metro Manila were either paralyzed or affected. So they expect that the protests were felt by the commuters and the government. Robert?
Thank you for your report, Ched Gatchalian. Asian shares drop amid ongoing energy supply concerns over the Iran war. Among Asian shares, only Kospi is in the green, with Hang Seng falling the most at nearly 1%. In currency trading, the US dollar mostly appreciates against the Asian currencies. In commodities, gold trades higher while oil prices are mixed. In crypto, Bitcoin rises almost 0.3%. Ethereum dips nearly 0.5%. Indonesia's fourth richest man passes away at 86. Michael Bambang Hartono, billionaire co-owner of Jarum Group, died at 1:15 p.m. local time. He and his brother Robert Budi Hartono helped turn a regional tobacco business into a diversified conglomerate. Their empire spans banking, electronics, and digital commerce, with a combined net worth of $17.4 billion. The Hartono brothers built their fortune on a bankrupt cigarette company acquired by their father in 1950. Filipino women do not need to go abroad to get a high-paying job. That's according to Carol Wilson, co-founder for the Women Foundation. Speaking to Bilyonaryo News channels at the forefront, Wilson said their non-government organization provides IT training for women. They also have partnered with private companies and local government units.
Tech jobs can be done remotely. I think that is a big change for women, especially women who have families who perhaps would like to work from home and do things. There is that opportunity.
The younger generation is taking on key roles at A. Soriano Corporation, or ANSCOR, ahead of its centennial in 2030. Andres Miguel Soriano IV joined last year as vice president. He is the son of Chairman Andres Soriano III, who has led the company for over 4 decades. Other family members have also stepped up. His sister Camila Maria Soriano joined the board in 2024, and cousin Eduardo Jose Soriano Jr. replaced his father on the board. Eduardo's sister, Maria Alexandra Soriano, became president of the Andres Soriano Foundation. Contractors are thinking of pausing projects as soaring oil prices and supply disruptions take a toll on the industry. Here's an exclusive report from Ches Sulit.
Contractors are now considering temporarily halting their projects amid the big-time oil price hikes. That's according to Philippine Constructors Association. Supply chains are also affected by the disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz as the Middle East crisis continues. The PCA also reports that contractors are allegedly avoiding even government projects. According to PCA President Engineer Jerry Pancho, the pricing used for bidding contracts remains outdated.
Hopefully, nag-update sila ang private and government ng price. Otherwise, wala talaga magiging ano. Supposed to be gagalaw na yung economy, may momentum na last few weeks ago. Okay na sana, pero with this fuel increase, biglang stand still ulit. Back to zero na naman.
Based on the group study, construction material prices are expected to rise by as much as 30% due to the situation in the Middle East. These materials include steel, cement, and basic chemicals.
Increase after matapos yan, another few months pa, padadrag pa yan. So siguro 1 or 2 quarters pa yung magiging delay ng mga infra projects.
Pancho says that as projects are put on hold, work suspensions will follow, affecting construction workers. In 2025, the Philippine Statistics Authority recorded the slowest GDP growth in 5 years at 4.4%. Government spending, particularly on infrastructure, also declined due to the flood control scandal. Public Works Chief Vince Dizon earlier said that the awarding of 2026 infrastructure projects would proceed this March. According to Dizon, formal requests have already been made to the Budget Department to issue the Special Allotment Release Orders or SAROs for these projects. Based on the DPWH Transparency Portal, only 2,814 projects are currently listed for procurement in 2026. Based on procurement data, some projects were already bid out as early as December 2025, but until now, there are still no notices of awards or contracts. According to a senior DPWH official who declined to be named, these are called bidding done short of award projects, supposedly due to lack of funding. The PCA is now urging the government to remove not just fuel cost pressures, but also excise tax and VAT on construction materials. The group is also pushing for the approval of price escalation mechanisms to align material costs with market rates. The association says it is ready to deepen coordination with the Department of Trade and Industry on price controls, particularly on the supplier side. The PCA is composed of around 1,500 licensed contractors recognized by the Philippine Contractors Accreditation Board. Che Sulit, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
A Soriano Corporation or ANSCOR posts 15% rise in net income to over 5 billion pesos in 2025. The investment vehicle of Bilyonaryo Andres Soriano III attributed the boost to strong industrial sales. It also noted gains from its equity holdings contributed to the record profit. Unilever is in talks to separate its food business and combine it with spice maker McCormick. If the deal succeeds, it could bring brands such as Unilever's Hellmann's Mayonnaise and Maryland-based McCormick's iconic Cholula hot sauce under one roof. Reports said Unilever has been weighing a broader separation of its food assets amid weakening demand as budget-conscious customers cut back on spending and opt for cheaper brands. Muslim worshippers gathered for Eid al-Fitr prayers at the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia on Friday. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf nations, including the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait, will mark the first day of the holiday on Friday. Other countries such as Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia announced that Eid al-Fitr would begin Saturday. The differing dates stem from various moon sightings. Norway's crown princess admits she was manipulated and deceived by late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Princess Mette-Marit said she regretted her friendship with Epstein. She also wished she had never met him. The U.S. Justice Department's release of millions of Epstein's documents revealed her extensive contact with the financier from 2011 to 2014. This included a 4-day stay at his Palm Beach house. The disclosure triggered an unusual rebuke by the Norwegian Prime Minister and calls for her to give a full account. And that's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Robert Tan. Join us again on Monday for the stories that help you plan your next big, bold business moves. Only here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.